2022. As we all know, since 2020, it seems like all cities have gotten worse. 2019 was America's safest year in decades, but since then, it's been all bad. Some say that it was EDD that contributed, and others say that it was the lack of in-person schooling. Regardless, the hope was that 2022 would turn the corner in America. People went back to work, schools opened up, and the economy was back in shape. Kind of. Well, as all of the official numbers roll in, it's evident that overall things have gotten better. However, there are some exceptions. For example, states like Oregon and Louisiana saw their worst years to date. Meanwhile, in states like Minnesota and California, crime is all the way down. Now, before we get into the list, let me break down the criteria. For this video, we're focusing on homicide rates only because that's the epitome of danger. If a city has a lot of homicides, trust me, there's a lot of other things going on as well. So what is a homicide rate? I wish I didn't have to explain this, but here we are. It's the total number divided by the population times 100. This way the rate is proportional to the population. So when you see that Chicago has 600, you think, oh my gosh, it must be the worst place ever. But what you don't consider is that the city has nearly 3 million residents. In reality, Chicago's rate of 17 per 100,000 is pretty standard for American cities. Chicago is not any worse than the average American city. Let me put the numbers in context. A very safe city will have a rate of 0 to 3. These are cities where violence is extremely uncommon. The vast majority of European and Asian cities stay within this range. Then a rate of 4 to 10 are moderately safe cities. Places like Seattle, San Francisco, and New York City stay within this range. Then we get to 11 to 20, and here is where things get serious. Chicago, Miami, and Jacksonville usually stay within this range. And next, from 21 to 30 is cause for serious concern. These are very dangerous. Cities like Houston, Oakland, and Las Vegas typically stay within this range. And from here, anything above 30 is a ridiculous level of violence. The type of place where any family should be trying their best to leave. However, to put this into context, these rates are nothing compared to Mexican cities. For example, in 2022, Tijuana had a rate of 140 per 100,000. I mentioned that to convey that there is a huge discrepancy between safe and unsafe. However, just because a city is safe doesn't mean that a specific neighborhood can't be dangerous. In fact, nearly every city you go to has a rough part of town. So with all that being said, let's dive into our final lists of 2022. We start off on a positive note, the 5 safest cities in the United States. These are cities where homicides are rare and families can feel safe letting their kids play outside. So if you're from one of these cities, you're probably not from the trenches. Number 1, Sunnyvale, California. With a population of 152,000, Sunnyvale recorded 0 homicides in 2022. The city is also one of the wealthiest in the country with an average income of $161,000. Number 2, Irvine, California. With a population of 309,000, the Southern California city recorded only 1 homicide in 2022. This resulted in a rate of 0.29 per 100,000. Number 3, San Jose, California. Despite having over 1 million residents, San Jose reported only 32 homicides in 2022. This gives it a rate of 3.2 per 100,000. And with this number, San Jose is by far the safest big city in America. So if you're looking for a safe place to move, well, you probably can't afford it. And next is probably can't afford. Number 4, New York City. For some reason, everyone thinks New York City is like Chicago. It's not at all, not even remotely close. In fact, New York City has been one of the safest cities in America for over a decade straight. In 2022, they had a total of 418 homicides. This results in a rate of 4.5 per 100,000. That's 5 times lower than Chicago and 8 times lower than Philadelphia. So I don't know where people came up with the notion that New York City is out of control, because it's simply not true. Number 5, Inglewood, California. For whatever reason, Inglewood has a rough reputation, but it's actually one of the safest cities in the entire country. In 2022, Inglewood saw a total of 5 homicides. This gives it a rate of 4.7 per 100,000. In all honesty, Inglewood is just a safe suburb, but it's plagued by a bad reputation. And for whatever reason, some residents want to make it seem worse than it is.
My part of Inglewood is murder capital, so it's different over there. People usually get murdered there every night. That was my side. That was literally my next street. I still walk some motherfucker on the side.
Okay, now that we've covered the safest list, let's get into the most dangerous cities. Number 10, Kansas City, Missouri. In 2022, Kansas City had 169 homicides, resulting in a rate of 34 per 100,000. This came in as the second worst year in Kansas City history. I literally don't know anything about this place, and you guys probably don't either, so let's skip along. Number 9, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. With 516 homicides, this gave Philadelphia a rate of 35 per 100,000. And as far as my research goes, Philadelphia has always been this bad. Both North and South Philly are known as two of the worst areas in the whole United States. Houses are run down, homeless are everywhere, and police are understaffed.
We're pulling some of our folks out of our administrative positions and going to deploy them out to some of those hotspot areas to focus on being visible.
What do you say to those who say they're unhappy about this move?
Well, listen, we're in a time that we've never seen before with having the amount of homicides that we've had in the city, the amount of shooting victims.
If you look at this interactive map, you can see that nowhere is safe. And because of this, Philadelphia has seen the largest exodus since 1975. Over 25,000 residents have left in 2022. And interestingly enough, the biggest city they're moving to is next on this list. Number 8, Atlanta, Georgia. In last year's episode, I made a joke that over 80% of crime is solved in Atlanta and that they must be snitching. Crazy how it turned out to be true. Well, yes, snitching is a common occurrence in Atlanta, but so is violence. In 2022, Atlanta saw a rate of 42.5 per 100,000. That is extremely dangerous. Most people wouldn't expect this because of how nice it is, but my gosh is it bad. Regardless, the pros outweigh the cons, and that's why it's still one of the fastest growing cities in America. Number 7, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Another unexpected city, but for locals, they've watched their city spiral out of control. In 2022, their rate was at 43 per 100,000. Milwaukee's police force has depleted, and this has led to many problems. In fact, it birthed a trend known as the Kia Boys. These are teenagers who have managed to hack Kias and steal them in under a minute. So in Milwaukee, there's a competition to steal Kias, drive them around, and dump them off for fun. So with all this crime, the city has become completely undesirable. The only thing going for it is the cheap cost of living in the business-friendly state of Wisconsin. Other than that, stay away. Number 6, Detroit, Michigan. This is where the list gets serious. In 2022, Detroit had a rate of 50 per 100,000. And I know Detroit already has an awful reputation, so I don't want to make it worse. Despite the bad crime, Detroit is actually making a comeback. Investment is up and the downtown area is actually really nice. I may be delusional, but I think Detroit can be the Atlanta of the North. Number 5, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. With a rate of 51 per 100,000, Baton Rouge is not a place you want to mess around in. It's a small city where everyone knows everyone, and this makes it even worse. People are leaving this city and the whole state of Louisiana as well. Interestingly enough, it's the only southern state that's lost population in 2022. Literally every other state has gained thousands in population. They're coming from the east and west coast for the low taxes and low cost of living. However, for Louisiana, they lost nearly 4% of their population. So I would highly advocate anyone to not move here, especially Baton Rouge. I've covered multiple rivalries in this city before, so if you want to see that, go check it out. Number 4, Baltimore, Maryland. With a rate of 58 per 100,000, Baltimore is a place to avoid at all costs. First because of their atrocious accents, but then because of the danger. Krishan Rock happens to be from Baltimore, and that's all I have to say. On a serious note, the city is falling apart in front of our eyes. It's honestly the most depressing place you can go to, and if you don't believe me, go check it out. Sadly, this is another city that thousands of people have left in 2022. And that takes us to number 3, St. Louis, Missouri. By now, we all know about St. Louis. They've consistently been in the top 3 for over 20 years. And in 2022, they saw a typical rate of 65 per 100,000. St. Louis is really the bottom of the bottom. Weather sucks, there's no good jobs, and you have to watch your back everywhere you go. But on a positive note, it's not as bad as the small city across the river. East St. Louis would be number 1 on this list, but they don't qualify because of their population. Anyways, I've been trying to do a video on St. Louis for the longest, but nobody wants to share information. And that takes us to number 2, New Orleans, Louisiana. The Crescent City has a rate of 72 per 100,000 in 2022. New Orleans has 393,000 residents but over 288 murders. In comparison, Los Angeles has 3.9 million residents and only 373 homicides. So with 10 times the population, Los Angeles barely had more than the tiny little city of New Orleans. How in the world is that possible? Like, what kind of issues can even lead to that? The craziest part is that over 60% of the crime occurs in one small area known as Eastern New Orleans. And what I found out is that no police officers want to work there. In fact, the New Orleans Police Department is sitting at under 50% of usual capacity. And because of this, it takes an average of 2.5 hours for police to respond to a call. No, I didn't make that up. It takes them 2.5 hours to respond to any call. Let me put this into perspective. In Seattle, the average response time is 7 minutes. And in Los Angeles, it's 20 minutes, which is bad enough. But 2.5 hours is a serious problem.
It's a problem we started reporting on years ago with our call waiting investigation, and now it's getting worse than ever.
New data presented to the City Council today shows NOPD response times have tripled in the last 3 years as officers leave the force.
Yeah, Sam Winstrom has more on what the council is calling a public health crisis.
NOPD's response times have skyrocketed in the last 3 years, going from 51 minutes to 2.5 hours on average. And this month, it's taking nearly 3 hours for police to respond to a call. It's no surprise that as those times go up, the number of officers on the force has gone down.
So if you live in New Orleans, you should probably take protection into your own hands. And that takes us to the final number 1 spot. This one you would have never expected. Number 1, Birmingham, Alabama. Probably a place you forgot exists. Frankly, I did too. Well, somehow Birmingham ended with a rate of 73 per 100,000. That is insane. So I had to do some research. The per capita income of Birmingham is only $26,000 a year, and the average household income is only $39,000. This is a very poor city, but somehow the cost of living has increased by 21%, and this may be a big reason for the elevated levels of violence. But honestly, I don't know, so if you're from Alabama, please let me know. I tried finding rappers in Birmingham, but I couldn't find any. Instead, I found out that Mobile, Alabama has a huge music scene. Strangely enough, Mobile's rate is very low, so I guess that Birmingham is the trenches and Mobile is much nicer. I could be wrong, but numbers don't lie. That was the top 10 most dangerous cities